I was never the kind of daughter who had answers about her childhood. Not because I didn't want to remember, because I simply couldn't. There were gaps. Blurred moments. Things that didn't make sense but were never questioned. And the older I got, the more I learned how to live around them. Like potholes on a road you stop bothering to report. You just swerve. My name is Agnes. I'm 35. And my mother, Celine, has always been complicated. Not in the way TV shows portray eccentric mothers. More in the way a cold wind is complicated. You never really see it, but it shapes everything around you. She raised me alone. No siblings. No photos of a father. No bedtime stories. Just silence, duty, and an emotional distance that felt like walking through a fog you weren't supposed to mention. I never felt hated. I wasn't neglected. But I was always unsure if I was truly loved, or just tolerated. She didn't like questions. She didn't like hugs. And when I was little, I used to catch her staring at me, not with affection, but with a strange kind of searching. Like she was trying to recognize something in me. Or remember something. I never knew which. We met at a hospital cafe last Tuesday. She'd been in for some blood work, nothing serious. The kind of appointment where the body ages but the personality sharpens. She was wearing her usual beige coat, perfectly pressed, the way she wore it when I was 9. Or 20. Nothing changed. Except maybe me. I had already ordered us coffee. I picked the table by the window, habit, not sentiment. She sat across from me, eyes scanning the room with clinical disinterest. Until she froze. Her cup stopped halfway to her lips. And then, without a word, she stood up. I turned my head and followed her gaze. A young woman, maybe mid-20s, sat alone near the corner, her back to us. Long dark hair. A navy coat. Nothing remarkable. Except the way my mother walked toward her, slowly, as if pulled by something invisible. And then I heard it. Agnes, my mother said softly. Her voice. Warmer than I'd ever heard it. She placed a trembling hand on the girl's shoulder. Come home, sweetheart. It's time. I didn't move. The girl turned around, confused, kind, definitely a stranger, and gently corrected her. Sorry, I think you've got the wrong person. But my mother didn't back away. She just smiled, glassy-eyed, like she was looking at a ghost she'd been waiting for. And I was still sitting there, watching, while my mother called another woman by my name. Not in confusion. Not in dementia. But with conviction. I didn't confront her that day. I wish I could say I stood up and demanded answers. That I slammed my hand on the table, called her name, forced her to look me in the eye and explain. But I didn't. Instead, I watched from that little corner table, watched as my mother gently apologized to the young woman, who smiled awkwardly and returned to her book. And then she came back. Sat down. Took a sip of her now cold coffee. As if nothing had happened. I waited. Maybe she'd say something. Laugh it off. But no. She adjusted her scarf. Looked out the window. And finally muttered. Some people look like each other. That's all. I nodded, but something inside me had shifted. I didn't feel angry. I felt displaced. Like a painting nudged half an inch off the wall. Subtle but deeply wrong. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed replaying everything. Not just the moment in the cafe, but every look, every strange pause from my childhood. How she used to ask if I remembered things I was sure had never happened. How she flinched once when I fell and cried, not out of panic but out of guilt. And how she used to whisper my name when she thought I was asleep. Not tenderly. Desperately. Agnes. Agnes. Like an anchor. Or an apology. I got out of bed and walked to the hallway closet. Inside was a plastic bin where I kept old things, report cards, school photos, some of her letters from when I was in college. I hadn't opened it in years. The letters were there. 5 in total. I sat on the floor and read them again, this time not as a daughter missing home, but as a stranger looking for cracks. And they were there. In one letter she mentioned a birthday party with blue balloons. Something I never had. In another she wrote, You always loved the seaside, but I've had a fear of open water since I was 6. Small details. Innocent on their own. But together, they sounded like someone remembering someone else. I flipped through an old family photo album. There weren't many pictures. Celine never liked cameras. But the ones that existed, all from when I was about 5 and older. There was nothing from before. Not a single photo of me as a toddler. No hospital wristband. No baby shoes. Not even a name tag from kindergarten. Just a blank start. Like someone pressed record after the first act had already passed. That night, I dreamed of a house with a red door. A place I didn't recognize but felt like I had once lived in. There was a voice calling me, not my mother's voice. Softer. Younger. And in the dream, I wasn't called Agnes. I was someone else. I woke up shaking. And I knew, this wasn't just about confusion or old age. Something was deeply wrong with the story of who I am. The next morning, I drove to the town records office. It was a gray building, one of those places that smells like dust, ink, and time itself. I'd passed it 100 times without looking twice. But that day, it felt like a vault. A place that might contain the version of me I was never told. I didn't know exactly what I was looking for. Just a beginning. "Hi," I said to the woman at the desk. "I'm looking for birth records. Mine." She asked for my name, date of birth, and identification. I gave her everything. She typed for a moment, then frowned at the screen. "There's no birth certificate registered here under that date," she said slowly. "Not in this town." "But I was born here. My mother told me." "I'm sorry," she said. "Maybe it was a different hospital? Sometimes records are sealed if." "If what?" She hesitated. "If there was an adoption." My stomach dropped. She tried to be helpful. Gave me a few numbers to call. I left the building with a folder of photocopies and a head full of questions I wasn't ready to ask out loud. Back in my apartment, I laid everything out on the kitchen table. Old letters. The incomplete photo albums. The town office folder. I stared at them until they blurred. Then I remembered something I hadn't thought about in years. Mrs. Perrin. Our neighbor when I was a kid. She used to bring me orange slices in winter and call me Pumpkin. She was kind. And forgetful. And once, when I was maybe 7, she told me, "You've grown so much, sweetie. Almost didn't recognize you when they brought you back." At the time, I didn't understand. Back from where? I'd asked. She laughed. "Oh, you know. That little break you took. That long nap." I assumed it was just something old people said. But now, it rang louder. Like an alarm I'd slept through for decades. I looked up her address online. She was still alive, living in a care home 20 minutes away. I called. Asked if I could visit. The nurse said, "Sure, she'll be happy to see you. She remembers you." When I walked into her room, she smiled before I said a word. "Agnes," she said softly. "You came back again." Again. We talked about small things at first. I didn't want to push. But eventually I asked, "Do you remember when I was little? Did anything ever happen to me? Like, was I ever missing?" She blinked. Looked past me. Then leaned forward. "They said you got sick," she whispered. "Real bad. And then one day, poof. Gone. And when you came back." She stopped. "What?" "You looked the same. But something was different. Your eyes. They stopped looking for things." I felt cold all over. "Did my mother ever say anything to you?" She said, Mrs. Perrin whispered, that it was better now. That she'd found peace. I left the care home shaking. Found peace? What kind of peace requires hiding a part of someone's life? That night, I opened the back of my mother's old closet. In the very bottom drawer, behind mothballs and folded linens, I found a box. A wooden one locked. I pried it open with a butter knife. Inside, a faded photograph of a toddler I didn't recognize. A hospital bracelet with the name Honor. And a small, water-damaged diary. My mother's handwriting on the first page. It read, February 1995, I didn't choose this, but I had to keep her alive. No matter what. I was 5 in 1995. Or at least, I thought I was. The pages of the diary were thin, almost translucent. Some were stuck together from age and dampness, others smudged by ink and what looked like tears. Or maybe water damage. I couldn't tell. But the handwriting, deliberate, neat, as if my mother had written with the weight of consequence in every stroke. February 1995. She's burning up. They say she might not make it through the night. I can't breathe. March 1995. The nurses are kind. They don't ask too many questions. I keep my voice calm when I say I'm her mother. March 27th. I know she's not mine, but I can't leave her like this. No one has come. No one is claiming her. What kind of world lets a child this small disappear into nothing? I paused. My hands trembled. My mouth was dry. The child. The hospital. This wasn't about me being taken from my mother. It was about me being taken by her. I read on, each word a stone in my chest. April 1995. They're going to discharge her soon. I had to make a decision. I told them I lost all our documents in a fire. I gave them my name. Said we'd just moved. No father. No visitors. No one to cross-check. May 1995. She started responding to Agnes. Maybe she was too young to remember her real name. Maybe she wants to forget. I don't blame her. I closed the book and stared at the wall. I felt outside of myself. Like my body was in the room, but my identity had left hours ago. Agnes wasn't a name I was born with. It was a name I was given in the ruins of something else. There had always been something about my mother's love that felt earned, conditional, as if I owed her something. I used to think that was just her nature, cold, disciplined, distant. But now I saw it wasn't detachment, it was guilt, fear. A love built on stolen ground. I stood in her house alone. She wasn't there that evening. She had a church meeting or book club, I didn't know. But I knew I had to confront her. Not tomorrow. Not in a week. Now. I drove to the church hall they used for weekly gatherings. It was almost empty when I arrived. Just her and one of the volunteers, stacking him books. When she saw me, she smiled, like she always did. Controlled. Measured. Agnes, she said warmly. You came. I held the diary in my hands. I know, I said. She didn't flinch. Didn't look surprised. Just tired. She looked at the floor. Then slowly sat down on the nearest bench. I thought I had more time, she whispered. I didn't sit. I couldn't. Who was I? I asked. She looked up, eyes glossy. You were a girl in a hospital with no name, no family, no future. And I, her voice cracked, I was a woman who had already lost everything. I waited. My baby died, she continued. That winter. Meningitis. It took her in less than a day. I didn't know what to do with that kind of silence. I walked the corridors of that hospital like a ghost. Her hands were folded tightly in her lap, knuckles white. And then there was you. In a crib. Alone. No name. No visitors. The nurses didn't even know where you came from. I was just there? I asked. You were barely alive, she said. But you opened your eyes. And you looked at me. And I told myself, if I don't take you, no one will. You needed a mother. And I needed to believe I still was one. I sat down, finally. Because my legs wouldn't hold me anymore. She reached out, almost as if to touch my hand. But stopped. I never meant to lie, she said. But once I did. I didn't know how to undo it without breaking you. Or breaking myself. And there it was. Not a monster. Not a kidnapper. Just a broken woman who made a choice and never looked back. Except now. I had. And what I saw was a truth that split my identity in half. I didn't speak for the rest of that night. After her confession, we sat in silence, not as mother and daughter, not even as strangers, but as two women, surrounded by the wreckage of a single decision. She didn't ask for forgiveness. And I didn't offer it. Because I didn't know what forgiveness even looked like for something like this. She drove me home. The ride was quiet. Her hands trembled slightly on the steering wheel. Before I got out, she said, "If you want to walk away, Agnes, or whatever your name truly is, I'll understand." I nodded once, but didn't respond. Because for the first time in my life, I didn't know what my name was supposed to feel like. The next morning, I called the social services department. They confirmed that in early 1995, a 2-year-old girl was admitted to the hospital with symptoms of malnutrition and fever. No ID. No relatives. The case went cold. They called her Baby Anna in the records. Anna. That was my name before I became Agnes. There were no leads, no matching missing person reports. No one ever came for her. I sat in that government office with a file in my lap and a quiet kind of grief in my chest. Not for what happened, but for the girl I never got to know, the one who was lost, then renamed, then reshaped. I went back to my mother's house one last time. She was in the garden, pruning her roses. The same ones she used to keep me away from when I was a child. They looked dry, brittle, beautiful, in that sad way things are when they try to bloom too late. She looked up and said nothing. Just waited. "I read the last page," I said. She didn't move. "The part where you said you loved me, but never really knew who I was." Still nothing. I stepped closer. "Maybe I don't know either. But I think I'm ready to find out." That's when she cried. Not loud. Not messy. Just tears that fell and didn't stop. I didn't hug her. Not that day. But I didn't walk away either. In the months that followed, I started therapy. Not because I was broken, because I was rearranged. I changed my name legally, not back to Anna, and not staying as Agnes. I chose something entirely new. A name not tied to grief or confusion, or someone else's story. Just mine. I still visit her. Not often. Sometimes we talk. Sometimes we sit in silence. Sometimes she calls me by my old name, and I let her. Because in her mind, Agnes is the girl she saved. And in mine, she's the woman who gave me a second life. Even if she took the first without permission. We live with what we inherit. But we heal with what we choose. And I've finally started choosing.